And this is how to create a realistic eyes for your animatronic.
First, you start with a 3D model of your eye. I also added a realistic iris to the model, but you can leave it flat if you're using printed design. Then you add the iris to the eye. You also have to scale the model and check if it fits your animatronic or your mask. So now printing can begin. I start with boiling the water and pouring it into the basin. Then I prepare resin for printing and mix it with desired color, in this case white. Then I put the resin into the hot water. Temperature between 30 and 35 degrees Celsius is perfect to avoid printing failures. Now we can pour the resin into the vat. Select the file and start the print. Additionally to the eyes, I also print supporting structures in one go. After the print is finished, we need to clean it. I start with pouring isopropyl alcohol into the vat. Then we can remove elements from printing bed. Afterwards I clean the printer bed. Then the vat itself. Then it's time to remove supports from printed elements. I start with removing unwanted elements by nippers, but be very careful here. You can also remove supports with spatula. It's also good to break supports into small chunks so they are easier to remove. And then one by one remove remaining supports. From time to time clean the basin. Then I further clean the elements with a brush and take them out to dry. Then it's a good time to clean your tools and reassemble the printer. Afterwards I put the cleaned model to be cured under UV light for 10 minutes. Now that the print is finished, it's time for sanding and smoothing the surface. Select sanding papers with different grids, as well as prepare your paints, brushes and paint thinner. So now we can start sanding the surface. I prefer to start sanding the element with 360 grit paper and then for finer finish and with 600 grit paper. After the sanding is done, you wash the element in water with soap to remove remaining dust. After such element preparation, we can start painting. Now it's time to assemble the eyeball with its supporting structure with M3 screw and ice cream stick. This structure helps with painting and is needed when casting eye in resin. The eyeball model was designed with a thread for a screw that holds every element in place, and this is how it looks after the assembly. I tape the model to the turntable for stability, and then I prepare the pink paint to be used to paint the back of an eye with an airbrush. I use airbrush to achieve a smooth gradient between the pink and the white colors of the eye, and the turntable helps with the uniform application of the paint. Little corrections from the bottom are needed. After that's done, it's good time to clean your airbrush. Now we have to waterproof the model, and for that I use a paper glue that after it is dry is elastic like a rubber. All the seams and holes need to be secured with glue, and for that I use a toothpick. This is how the glue looks wet and after it is dry. If you don't want to paint the eyes manually, it is possible to use the flat eye design and print the irises on the paper and then glue them. Now it's time to create little capillary veins for the back of an eye. To do that, you start with a red thread and by selecting a singular strand from it. With that strand, you create even finer fibers by scraping it with a scalpel. We need that for the fine capillary vein look, and you glue the fibers to the eye using super glue, tweezers, as well as your knife. And now it's time to paint the iris with your favorite color, in my case yellow. Start with a good shade. I start the painting process with covering irises with base pale yellow color and black for the pupils. Now it's a good time to prepare the rest of colors. Wolf's eyes have this black or dark brown ring around the irises. For the ring I use very thin paint of dark brown color. After that's finished, we can put some color into the eye. From what I saw, the wolf's eyes are darker around the edges of the iris and near the pupil, and are brighter in the middle, so we want to recreate that effect. In the valleys of the iris we put very thin, very dark paint to make the shadows more pronounced, while the peaks of the iris structure we paint very bright to make the highlights pop up. So now that painting is done, it is time for casting the eyes in resin. In order to cast the eyes in resin, you have to have a mold to do so. So now it is time to print the casting cylinder. The mold was designed with a wall thickness thin enough for easy casting and demolding. Too thin of a mold could make the model too warped, while too thick of a mold could make the demolding process very difficult. That's why the walls of the mold are around 4 mm thick in the thinnest section. And here is the mold insert compared to the eye model. Now it is time to prepare the silicone. I measure 125 ml of liquid and mark it on the cup. Then I wipe the cup dry. For the mold I used soft silicone. Now it's time to assemble the mold insert with M3 screw and ice cream stick. The model of the insert is hollow on the inside, that's why we have to glue it to the casting cylinder in order for it not to rise during the pouring of the silicone. Now it's time to prepare non-silicone based anti-adhesion spray. Apply the spray on the model as well as on the inside of the cylinder and pour out the excess. Now it's time to mix the silicone with the catalyst. In my case proportions are 100:3 in volume. Now we mix it until the color is even, and in order to degas the silicone we use vacuum chamber. Put the silicone in and close the lid. Shut the valve and pump the gas out. At the same time keep a close eye on the silicone because it might overflow from the cap. Around -0.8 the bubbles are getting bigger. Now we let the air in and take out the silicone. Now it's a good time to quickly clean up the desk. I cut the top of the cap off for easier silicone application. I fill out the cylinder with silicone to around its half point, after which we can glue the eye model to it. Remember to be on the center and symmetrical. After glue is dry, we continue pouring in the silicone. Now we put aside such prepared assembly to harden for 24 hours. After which time we can disassemble the cylinder and take out the model out of the silicone. If you'd like to have the eyes for your project, feel free to DM me or visit my Etsy shop. And that mold is now ready for casting. So let's start by preparing the eyes for resin casting by securing them to the piece of PCV. Then let's start the air compressor. And prepare 2-part epoxy resin by mixing it in proportions specified on the bottle. In my case, for every 100 grams of A part of resin I need to add 35 grams of B part. After such preparation we can mix the resin and apply it carefully on the eyes. In first step we apply the epoxy resin only in the pupils of eyes and only lay a thin layer of resin on the irises, being careful for the resin not to spill over. The eyes themselves will be cast in resin in the second step. In order to get rid of air bubbles from the resin, we put the eyes in the pressure chamber. After the lid is secured, I increase the air pressure up to 5 atmospheres and leave it for a week to harden. In the meantime, I prepare LEDs serving as the backlight of the eye. I reduce the size of original LED heatsink by clipping it and make place for mounting points using a drill. Then I drill a small hole in LED heatsink in order to bolt it to the LED mount, which is then connected to the eyeballs themselves. Then it's time to assemble the elements using M1 bolts, after which we can solder the wires to negative and positive ports of the LED. And for now, we have LED prepared. After 1 week of waiting, we can release the pressure and take out the eyes. And this is how they look like. Don't worry if the surface is a little rough. We will cover it in second layer of resin soon. And finally we assemble the eyes so they fit the silicone cast. We prepare resin one more time, now in higher quantity, and pour it into the cast so it fills around third way up. We spread the resin evenly around the surface as much as we can, after which we can insert the eye into the cast. We pressurize the model one more time for 1 week, after which time we can take out the model out of the cast. Then we need to remove unwanted supporting elements by cutting it in the thinnest section of the model. After which the cut edge needs to be refined and smoothened out. I start polishing using water paper of grade 1000, 1500 and 2200. After which I switch to using Tamiya polishing pastes, starting with coarse paste, then fine, then finish paste. And this is how they look before and after. And here's how the painted eye compares to the printed eye. Then it's time to drill the mounting holes that will be used to attach the eye to the servo. The top hole is needed for a screwdriver to be able to reach the bottom hole. And now for the final assembly of the LED to the eye using M1 bolts. To check if the eyes work, I connect them to the voltage source. And we're finished. If you'd like to have the files for the eyes or the mask, check the links in the description. Bye bye!